As the date of Lord Walter Went's grand tourney at Harrenhal grew ever closer, tensions and suspicions only grew within the walls of the Red Keep. King Aerys II, by this time, was now deep into his madness, with his paranoia only getting worse as his small council and spy masters filled his ears with tales of Prince Rhaegar and the rumours that he was the mastermind of this great tourney, which he wished to become an impromptu great council he would use to depose his father's rule. As we have already discussed, there may have been some legitimate evidence that suggests this was in fact Prince Rhaegar's plan, but in truth, none of this really matters, as even the simple suspicion of Rhaegar, true or not, was enough proof for Aerys. Lord Carton Chelstead urged Aerys to put an end to this tourney one way or another, with Lord Staunton even going as far as to suggest that he should outlaw all tourneys in Westeros to prevent them from becoming co-opted into rebellious gatherings by the king's enemies. The issue for Aerys was, tourneys and events of their like were widely popular among the smallfolk. Lord Merryweather warned the king that such a ban on tourneys would only serve to make Aerys even more unpopular amongst the commons. Thus, the king made a very unexpected decision. For the first time since the defiance of Duskendale, he would leave the safety of the Red Keep. King Aerys would attend this great tourney. It may have been Aerys' flawed logic that if he himself were present, then his enemies would surely not have the gall to conspire against him right under his very nose. The letters of Grand Maester Pycelle tell us that Aerys hoped that his presence at such an event would win him back the love of his lords and small folk. If this was truly King Aerys' intent, we will never know, but regardless, his very presence at this tourney was a grievous miscalculation, one a man with more self-awareness would not have made. While yes, the presence of the king himself at a tourney would only serve to make it grander and more prestigious than it already was, drawing lords and knights from every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. Many of those who attended had never seen the king in person, and those who had saw him many years ago when Aerys was still that promising young man, now lost to time and madness. They were shocked and appalled when they saw what had become of their monarch, his long, thick yellow fingernails starting to curl inward, his beard crusty and tangled, his once proud silver Valyrian hair unwashed, matted, almost the same colour as his fingernails. Even to look at the king, you would see a man not in his right mind. In the presence of his son, Prince Rhaegar, a perfect example of the blood of all Valyria, it only made the king's condition hit harder for many. But it was not the look of the king that spoke volumes. His behaviour was clearly not that of a sane man. Aerys could go from mirth, jesting with his lickspittles one moment, to melancholy and rage in the blink of an eye. Of the many accounts of the Tourney of Harrenhal that exist to us, each and every one speaks of King Aerys' hysterical laughter, long silences, bouts of weeping, and then sudden rages. To those who had any recent interaction or knowledge of the king, this was of no surprise, but for many, this was a new and shocking reality. King Aerys had become suspicious of all, centered around his son and heir, Prince Rhaegar, his host, Lord Walter Went, and even suspicious of every lord and knight who dared to even attend what he saw as his traitor's tourney, and somehow, confusingly, he even suspected those who did not attend at all, notably Tywin Lannister, his former hand and best friend, whom chose to stay at Casterly Rock, a man who, along with Prince Rhaegar, Aerys feared was the mastermind behind the supposed scheme to usurp him. At the tourney's opening ceremony, King Aerys made a great public show of Sir Jaime Lannister's investiture into the sworn brotherhood of the Kingsguard. The young knight said his vow in the king's royal pavilion, kneeling on one knee in his new gleaming white armour, as half the lords of the realm looked on. When Lord Commander Sir Gerald Hightower raised him up, he clasped a white cloak around the young knight's shoulders. A roar went up from the crowd, as by now word of Sir Jaime's actions against the Kingswood Brotherhood had become a common story amongst the lords and small folk. He was now admired for his courage, gallantry, and his prowess with a sword, with many believing the only man who could possibly best this young knight was Sir Arthur Dane, the Sword of the Morning himself. Though Tywin Lannister did not attend the Tourney at Harrenhal himself, there were countless men there to represent him from among his lord's bannermen, who had brought with them hundreds of knights, as they raised a lusty cheer for the newest and youngest member of the sworn brotherhood of the Kingsguard. At this time, King Aerys was pleased with his choice of appointing Sir Jaime, given how beloved he was among the masses and the damage it had done to Tywin Lannister. But this soon turned in to the king believing that these cheers were in fact for him, that he had won back the love and respect of his smallfolk and lords. Only a few hours after Sir Jaime had been sworn in, however, did King Aerys begin to nurse grave doubts about his new protector. It is said there were members of his own small council who fanned the flames of these doubts. It was King Aerys' intent that in naming Sir Jaime to the Kingsguard, that he was wounding and humbling his old friend Tywin Lannister. Through the insights of Grand Maester Pycelle after the fact, Aerys only now blatantly realised he would henceforth have Tywin Lannister's own son beside him day and night, with sword in hand. It would be a very easy thing for the young knight, under orders of his father and a promise of a pardon from Prince Rhaegar, to end the king's life. It's hard to really know if there was any truth to the king's ramblings. Yes, Sir Jaime very well had easy access to the king and could potentially assassinate him with ease. But the question we have to ask here is a simple one. Would Tywin Lannister be happy to risk the life of his own son in order to seek petty vengeance? There is a high chance that even if promises were made of a hypothetical pardon, Jaime would never have left the room he had killed the king, let alone remain alive long enough as a prisoner of the small council. On balance, Aerys' fears seem unlikely, but much like most of the political intrigue of this time, we can never really know for sure. Very simply, this idea frightened the king so badly that he could hardly eat at that night's grand feast in Harrenhal's enormous Great Hall. According to Grand Maester Pycelle, Aerys summoned Sir Jaime to attend him while squatting over his chamber pot, and commanded him to return to King's Landing that very night to serve as a new protector to Queen Rhaella and Prince Viserys, who had not accompanied the king to Harrenhal. It is said the Lord Commander, Gerald Hightower, offered to go in Jaime's place, but Aerys refused him firmly. For Jaime Lannister, a brilliant young knight who had no doubt hoped to distinguish himself in this grand tourney, would have been bitterly disappointed at the command of his king. But Sir Jaime stayed true to his new vow and set off to the Red Keep at once with no hesitation or complaint, and played no further part in the tourney at Harrenhal, save maybe in the mind of the Mad King. But the king's presence was only one part of this great tourney, and events were transpiring among the pavilions of the Lords assembled that would forever change Westeros and the fate of House Targaryen forever.